Hey guys, welcome back to Get Motivated and Fit TV. If you're new to the channel, the concept behind Get Motivated is to get more life. So again, for this week and this week alone, I am in honor of Correctional Officer Week. I am dropping a video every day. Again, just letting y'all know my experience, my time working at a maximum prison. And as I've mentioned in the past videos, it takes a certain individual to work inside the prison. All right, so today I'm going to talk about being fully staffed, how the prison is ran. But before I do, I'm going to talk about my style of the stuff that I learned at the beginning when I first didn't know how to be an officer versus you know basically I'm getting myself confused. So when I first started doing OJT, I didn't know the lingo. I didn't know. So once I was done with OJT and I was already on shift, I had to find my style. I had to find, okay, what worked for me, right? On top of doing my security rounds, which was every 30 minutes, I also had to do cell searches, and then from there, whether it was doing restriction showers, whether it was taking out offenders for their lay-ins, I had to find my style, right? I had to, okay, the first thing that I have to do, let me do my security check as soon as I take over the pod. Make sure everybody's alive, right? Make sure that night shift didn't do their making sure that night shift did do their job, but in the event if they didn't, let me make sure everyone's alive, right? Living, breathing body. So that was one. After I did my security check, then from there it was up to me. Okay, let me knock out these showers, right? The restriction showers. When we're able to write cases, we're able to write offense reports. In the event if an offender fails to obey order, if an offender is caught out of place, the list is there, right? So in order to keep the day room at a minimum, you want to write cases that are justified, and basically keep them in the house. That way, when it's day room time, you don't have so many offenders out in the day room. All right, so that was a trick that I learned along the way. But at the beginning, it was very hard at the beginning. I was like I said, I was struggling with I remember it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and my desk officer is like, "Hey, where are your cell searches?" I'm like, "Oh, I haven't gotten around to them yet." What the heck? What do you mean? You took over at 6. Everyone else turned in their stuff, and so it was that kind of thing, right? Because for me at that time, it's like, okay, well, I don't want to do the cell searches when they're in the day room. I gotta I was always coming up. I always wanted to wait until they went to chow. Once they went out to chow, then they had 5-10 minutes real quick to go through their cell search, to go through their cells. And but that was just me. Over time, I knew what, like I said, I would switch it up. If I didn't do Once I did my security check, instead of doing the restriction showers, then I hey, cell search, come on. And then I would either, at my preference, I would either strip them out one by one and then put them in the showers, or take them to the showers. Or if not, I would tell them hey, go wait outside the day room, and the officer would open the door, and they would just be in the shit. What was it called? Oh, damn, there was a term. I forgot what the term was. So I would kick them out, and then I'll just go to the cell search real quick. So yeah, that's pretty much. It's doing the same thing, repetitive. The only thing is you do want to switch up your security check. You know what I mean by that? If you start in one section one day and you start on one row, switch it up. The next day, start in 3 row. Next time around, start in 3 section. And there's 3 sections in each pod, right? So, you always want to switch it up. You don't want to do the same thing, because the offenders, they're studying you too, right? So Okay, but let me go ahead and go into the operation sides of things. So once we meet in the morning for debrief, we find out right then and there how many officers are in turnout, and then depending if we're fat, we're gonna, and the lieutenant will say like, hey, you know what, we have everything, we have enough bodies to fill all the spots. We're gonna run everything. So they'll call out for the rec yard. They'll call out for for the rec officer for A side and for B side, and for the most part, rec is done on both sides, and we have morning and afternoon. All right, so here we go. So as an officer, as a rover, right, you're assigned either on A side, 3 building or 4 building. Your job is to do your first drop, and that's all your workers. So for the most part, they're already ready to go. All you gotta do is roll those 4 doors. They come out, they close the door. You're just going behind them, making sure that the doors are secured. And then, of course, right, with your flashlight, you want to check whoever's still in there, make sure that they're breathing. Do some kind of like, hey, you're all right in there. And as long as they move, go to the next one. And that's all you're doing, right? So A side is pretty laid back because that's the side where they're on good behavior, right? And that's where all your workers are. So for the most part, it's very minimum like offenders that you have to deal with because they're all workers. And I'm talking about they work in the kitchen, they work out in the field. There's some of them are in the maintenance. Some of them are the building SSIs. So it just, that's A side, right? So you're fully staffed. All right, you're dropping out for, at the same time you're dropping out for your workers, you're dropping out for your lay-ins, and then who wants to go to rec, and you have to make that announcement. Outside rec, get ready, and you want to give them time to get ready, like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. And then the desk officer is running the building. You have your building sergeant, but the desk officer is the one that's running the building. So the desk officer will be the one to call the picket. Like, hey, send me out your workers. Hey, send me out your lay-ins. Hey, send me out. And at that time, that's mass movement. So for the most part, you want to help. The building sergeant. You want to help with the offenders as they're walking out. Hey, have your shirt tucked in. Get on the right side of the line, get off the noise. And then randomly, right, as they're either going out or they're coming back in, you want to do pat downs. And then for rec, the same thing, right? For rec, you do have to strip them out because that's when shit pops off, right? You want to make sure that they don't have any weapons, so you want to strip them out on the way out and on the way in. So after rec, and it was usually, I want to say 7 to 9 was rec. Count time was at 8 o'clock, right? So once that happened, you had to do count. You had your roster, and there's 2 different counts. One is just the head count, and then the second one is the roster count. So each pod, you have your rover, and then you have your picket officer. The rover does the head count, right? So whoever's in the day room, hey, y'all line up for count. They'll line up, and then they'll tell you like, oh, I stay in 7 top, and you mark it on your count sheet, 7 top. Put a check mark X, whatever works for you. And then from there, you switch out with your picket. Your picket comes down. Your picket does the roster. The roster, he'll have to go, supposed to, has to go and like, hey, let me see your ID, and match the ID with the roster, right? And check off. It's more time consuming. So once you get your count, your first head count, you turn that into your desk officer. The desk officer calls in to the lieutenant's office so they can report the count, and then the lieutenant has the big old count sheet, and everything has to add up. And for the most part, you wanna clear count within the hour. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. There's been times where everybody go to the house, right? Like everybody, go back to the house because we can't clear count. And that's at that point, I want to say the warden makes that call. Um, and it's either something that, simple, the one of the officers, must have not counted somebody or over counted somebody. Like it just depends, right? But the biggest thing for count time is to make sure there's not an escape. That's the whole reason. All right, so once count is cleared, then everybody comes back in from rec, and then at that point, hey, y'all get ready for chow, right? So, I want to say lunchtime was at what, like about 10 o'clock. So it was supposed to be breakfast, but lunchtime is at 10 o'clock at the prison, more or less, right? So, everybody goes back in, and then y'all get ready for chow, and whoever's in the, I'm talking about A side for right now. And then from there, shoot them out, right? A side gets done a lot faster because for the most part everybody's at work. And then from there, once they come back from chow, then it's just in and out for day room. And A side is just in and out every hour, right? So it should be. That's all you're doing all day. Plus your cell searches. Um, there are some restrictions on A side, not as many. But if they are in restriction, you just got to make sure that they stay in the day room. I mean, that they stay in the house, but that they're allowed to take their shower, right? Whenever, usually for restriction, it's usually done at the last hour of day room on A side. Um, so once lunch is done, they go back in, and at that point, you did your cell searches along the way. And then if it's commissary day 2, oh my gosh, at that point, hey, in and out for commissary. And that's when everybody wants to come out. Somebody that could have been asleep all day, all of a sudden they're the first ones out the door. Right? So commissary, oh my gosh, that was just like, you know, uh that was fun times. And a headache too. Cause like commissary, at that point, commissary is ran by commissary. The desk officer doesn't. All the desk officer does is get that phone call, pick up that phone, and commissary will say, "Hey, we're ready. Send me a shot." And so these offenders, man, like we'll send the first shot, and I can be in the picket because I already did my time on the floor, and then I just hear banging, banging, and then they'll go like this, right? Like, and I mean, like, there's nothing I can do. Like, I can't open the door without the officers. So, but it just got so annoying because all they wanted to do was go to fucking commissary, right? And the reason why commissary is so important is because that's their money, right? That's how they settle bets. That's how they settle, scores. That's how you keep the peace inside the prison, right? So, um, so you did rec, lunch, commissary, uh, and then you have afternoon rec, right? Afternoon rec is around the same time. It's either before count or after count, but it's usually around the same time as well. So, it's everything's fast paced when we're fully staffed and the time goes by. So then again, right, in and out for afternoon rec. And for the most part, the ones that stayed in the house in the morning, those are the ones that are coming out, in the afternoon. And the same thing, right? Then you have count time again. You do this, but this time around, you're just doing 2 head counts. So the rover does the first head count, and then the picket, y'all switch out, and then the picket does a second head count, and then that's it. And for the most part, you just want to match, right? You want to make sure that, if you had because there's 24 cells in each section. So if it's a full house, that's 48 offenders in each section, right? So if there's 48 offenders, if it is a full house, right? But then you got some that are workers, so all that takes into account. So after the rec and count clears, then you got dinner, right? You got to drop for dinner. At times it's usually about 3 o'clock, about 3:30 for dinner. And then so you send them out for dinner. They come back, And by that time, usually by 3, 4 o'clock, then you got moves, right? Because in the mornings when you have these lay-ins, some of these offenders they they go what's called for, I believe it's UCC, if I remember correctly. I don't know if it's unit unit classified committee. And basically, it's their report, their file. The warden looks over it, and basically, like, if they're a G3, they're looking at it to see if they can get to, promoted to a G2, right? And because it's all a classification, right? You have from a G1 to G5. G1, you're good behavior. G5, you're the worst of the worst in general population, right? So it really depends on the offender's behavior, if they don't have any cases on them. And sometimes you'll have some that they caught cases, so the warden is like, you know what, like, we give you a chance. We're gonna go ahead and demote you. Pack up your stuff. You're gonna move over to B side. We're gonna put you as a G4, right? And that will happen. And then of course, right, you have some that are on B side that are G4s, and they're on good behavior. So then the warden will be like, you know what, pack your stuff. We're gonna move you to A side. So it's always, there's always gonna be moves, right? As far as I want to say Monday through Thursday. Friday, I don't think there's any on Friday. I don't think. I could be wrong. Um, but yeah, right. So your job as the officer is, in the event if the offender gets locked up for whatever reason, um, if the offender is moving, like, you have to inventory their property. So that's another headache on top of what you're already dealing with, because you have to, like, hey, pack up your stuff, and then once you're ready, let me know. And then you have to sit there, go through the offender's property. If you're doing it by the book, you got to make sure that whatever they have, hey, let me see your ID. You want to make sure that their ID matches with what they have as far as their radio, their fan. Make sure it's not scratched off. Make sure it's not altered. Because yeah, there'll be some instances where they don't have a fan, so they got it from someone else. They bought it off of someone else, and then they scratched off their ID and put theirs on. So, of course, right, as you're going through the property, you want to make sure that there's no contraband in there, and then you have to list everything on the inventory sheet, and then from there, for the most part, once they're ready to move, the desk officer will let you know, like, hey, you know what, go ahead and send them out. For the most part, we'll just put them in the we had these rooms that multi-purpose room, that's what they were called. So we would just put them in there for the meantime, just lock the door behind them, and they would just be there until on B side you had close custody. For the most part, they would be the ones to come down with the ones that were moving from B side to A side. They would bring them, and then from there they would drop off the ones that were coming from B side, and they would pick up the ones from A side going to B side. And then, not for the most part, we would switch, because some were moving from 4 building to 3 building. So yeah, like, that's I feel like I'm just rambling on, but I mean, that's pretty much, like, I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty much to the T of how the unit is ran. If you're fully operational, you have morning rec, afternoon rec, morning count, afternoon count, lunch, dinner. You got your moves, and then on top of all that, if there's any, if there's any incident command system on top of that, that's when it's like, and usually you'll hear it right on the radio, and it's usually on B side, right? It's usually A building. A building was always the one where shit will pop off, right? You would always hear it, 61 to central control, initiating ICS. I have a one-on-one offender fight, or I have a staff assault. you know, whatever case was on the radio. So at that point, like, everything stopped, right? No movement. You know, we had to go contain the situation, right? As far as like whoever was able to respond, because your job as an officer, if you're sent to that pod, that's your baby. Like, for those 12 hours, you cannot leave that pod. Even if you think, you know, like, hey, it's time for my break, like, no, you gotta wait until somebody relieves you. And for the most part, it would be the rec officer, right? The Whoever was the rec officer on A side would be the one to relieve, you know, everybody. Then the desk officer would be the one to will be the one to, like, hey, you know, go on break. And he'll be the one to, like, you know, like I said, he's the one that ran the building. um so I think that'll be it for this video. Like I said, this was just, you know, more for like operational for A side. Oh, you know what, let me go ahead and do B side. So B side is a little bit different because, as I mentioned, A side all day long, you know, you have a day room. B side, during the week, unless it been changed, but during the week, they get 2 hours a day room, and on the weekends they get 3 hours a day room, right? So the way it works on B side is you have no workers. All you have is their day room time, and then the lay-ins. And the lay-ins, for the most part, they will be for, they put in a sick request to go see medical. Um, Not so much the law library. No, maybe law library. Trying to think. I don't think they had much as far as like lay-ins go. But at that point, you know, for me, when I was an officer on B side, I would look at my restriction list and I would knock out those showers first, right? Before day room happened. And I would wake them up. Hey, you want a shower? Yes or no? Yes or no? And you had 2 showers in 3 row, 2 showers in 2 row, 2 showers on 1 row. So you had 6 showers. So, you know, I would go through my first row, and you know, hey, you know, you want a shower? Yes, no. And if they said yes, you know, take them out. You know, they'll pick whatever shower they want to get on. But then I would go behind. Once I got 6, I would go behind and lock them, right? Lock the showers. And like, I'll be back, and then go to 2 section, 3 section, do the same thing. And for the most part, once they were all done, I take them back, you know, take them out of the shower, escort them into the house, and depending who else I had on my list, just kept it going, right? That was for restriction showers. Once day room time happened, the same thing, right? Hey, y'all get ready for day room, and stand in front of your door if you're gonna come out. That's where it got a little bit more like more easier, but I had to learn the hard way. If they're not standing in front of their door, I'm going by, because I already made that announcement. Hey, y'all get ready for day room. If you're on restriction, stay in the house. Stand in front of your door if you're coming out. And then 3 row, get ready. And I would always start on 3 row. And if they're not in the house, if I go to 24, they're not in the, if they're not standing in front of the door, I'm going to 23. And you know, if they're open, but that one was one door at a time, right? Because I wanted to control the movement. And same thing, once they got out. And then that was the other thing too, because some of these guys, they'll come out, take some shit out, and then like, oh crap, I forgot this. And then you're there waiting. Like, nah, once that happens, shit, close it and go to the next one. Like, hey, you stuck out, you know, wait for the next hour, for the last hour. Am I an ass? I mean, that's just the way I was taught, right? That's what I learned. Because if not, you're gonna be there all day, and you know, you're taking time away from 3 section, from their day room time, right? But I learned, for me, I kept track. I kept track of my time. If I dropped 1 section right at 9 o'clock, and by the time I got to 3 section and it was 9:30, Well, guess what? At 11:33 section, it's going back to the house. That's just the way, for me, because they get the 2 hours, right? It's not, just because it's 9 to 11, but that was just me. I had some officers that were like, no, 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 like their room time is up. It's just the 2 hours, so we would bump heads. But it's like, I'm running the pod, right? Like I'm on the floor. Now, now, and then for rec, the same thing. If they were on restriction, they couldn't come out for rec. So, get them out of the house. And then for chow time, everybody came out for chow. And you just had to be quick. Like, hey, y'all get ready for chow, stand in front of the door. And at that time, 4 doors at a time, right? 4 doors at a time for chow. And as soon as those two came out, boom, close the door, go to the next one, close it, and just one after another. And then the picket knew, as long as you gave him that signal, he will roll the next door, because you always wanted to have 4 doors open at a time, and just make the time go by. Now sometimes you had an officer like, no, 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 no. Like if he was in the picket, like, no, 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 you got to be at that door, so I can open it. And that's because if anything happens, they're gonna look at the camera, and they're gonna be like, "Hey, why did that door open if you weren't over there?" Because again, right, like it has to be by the book. It has to be by the uh, the SOP, standard operating procedure, right? If it wasn't listed on there, you couldn't. But again, right, like we want to make our lives a lot easier. Um, so so yeah. Um, But it was always constant communication, right? Like, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start on 3 row, roll 4 doors at a time. Once you see, and then in the tower and the control in the picket, like you had your switches, and it would light up red if it was open. No, green if it was open, and then red means that it was closed. Right. So hey, as long as you have four, no more than four, like just keep them at it. And that was pretty much it, right? Drop them for chow. Uh, and then, but for the most part, they were in the house, right? For the most part, they were just in the house because their daring time was in the morning, 9 to 11, I believe 9 to 11, and then no, or was it no? Because that would be chow time too. I don't know. Interesting. I don't think it was. Nah, I think it was in the afternoon. Yeah, it had to be in the afternoon because it wouldn't be during their chow time, their day room time. I think it was like maybe 10 to 12 or 12 to 2. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, I think that'll be it for this one, right? I think tomorrow I'll go more into detail as far as like, because there's other positions, um, you know, as far as like, I just talked about being a rover and being the picket officer. If you're in that picket, your job is to keep an eye on your officer. You're the eyes behind their back. And if shit pops out, you just flash the lights, right, to get the officer's attention. Um, and you're that lifeline, right? You're their lifeline, I should say, because if shit pops out, you get on that radio, and then whatever's happening. So you always have to make sure that whoever you were partnered with, that they were a good officer, right? That they were gonna have your back, because there's some that, man, you would really hope that, man, hopefully I'm not paired up with them because they're too friendly with the offenders, or they just don't care. They just want to get their money. They just want to get their check. Or you had those that they just didn't want to work, right? Like they're entitled to have, on the A side, they're entitled to have their in and out every hour. And we had some officers that just, they'll drop that first hour, 2 3 hours would go by, not even a security check, not even an in and out. And it's just like, damn, like, what do you do, right? And at that point, it's like, I can let the sergeant know, but then like you're snitching on your fellow officer, and there's a code, so it's just one of those things that, yeah. But tomorrow I'll go into more detail with the time that I did a turnout for a little bit, and then when I felt like it was a promotion, when I became a desk officer as well as chain officer. And those positions, those are really mainly more for the veterans, right? So I think I became a desk officer, I want to say by my second year, I think. And then chain, I think it was like this about around the same time. So they always had me alternating between desk officer and chain officer. But like I said, you're the desk officer, you're running that building. So yeah, man, like this is the longest video I've ever done. You could tell it's like very I think I painted like a picture. Hopefully y'all have an understanding, right, of how everything was ran. And I feel like I did forget something. I feel like I did. But if y'all are still here with me, I appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope y'all are well. I hope y'all are blessed. And I'll see y'all tomorrow.